Hello, and welcome back to the Future Corporation podcast. I'm Jonathan Glennie. I've spent a lot of time over the last few months in meetings discussing the future of international development, international cooperation. The OECD conference in Paris just now, Global Partnerships Conference in London, conversations around aid cuts, geopolitical fragmentation, climate finance, development banks, the future of multilateralism. And in all of these conversations, the same concept keeps coming up. People keep talking about mutual interest or mutual benefit. And I've noticed from many people, there's a slightly nervous reaction, a concern that these ideas somehow represent a retreat from solidarity, that we're moving away from a world motivated by values towards one motivated by transactions, less solidarity, more self-interest, less justice, more deal making. And understand why people worry about that. There is absolutely a danger that international cooperation becomes more transactional. We can already see examples of it. Countries pursuing narrow economic advantage, development finance tied to commercial interests, geopolitical competition dressed up as cooperation. Those dangers are real, they're clear and present. But I think there is also a danger on the other side. And that danger is that we surrender concepts like mutual interest and partnership to the transactionalists, that we allow them to own those ideas. Because I want to argue something that may sound slightly provocative to some. Mutual interest is not a retreat from solidarity. It is solidarity. It's the deepest and most durable form of solidarity available to us. I think that may sound strange to some of you. You might have grown up with a particular understanding of solidarity. Solidarity means helping others, standing with those who suffer, supporting those who have less power. But I would argue that that is charity. That's kindness. That's compassion, all of which are wonderful and beautiful and important. But solidarity is different. And you're talking to the person who wrote the first global solidarity report, now a major annual publication with my old colleagues at Global Nation. Solidarity begins with a recognition that our lives are connected, that our well-being is connected, that our futures are connected. Helping others is not simply an act of generosity, it's an act of collective wisdom, because their future affects mine and my future affects theirs. Actually, if you look at human history, obviously this idea is clear. Human beings have always been organized into communities, originally tiny communities, families, villages, tribes. People supported one another because they understood that survival depended upon cooperation. Solidarity and self-interest are not separate things, they are intertwined. Over time, those circles expanded from villages to towns, from towns to regions, from regions to nations. And one of the great achievements of modern history was persuading millions of people who would never meet one another that they belonged to the same community, a nation, that they should contribute to common institutions, pay taxes, support public services, help strangers. Why? Partly because of values, but also because of interests. People understood that everybody was safer, healthier, and more prosperous when the wider community functioned well. That's the story of human progress, the gradual expansion of our understanding of who belongs within our circle of concern, the gradual expansion of solidarity. And today we're living the next stage of that story. Humanity itself is becoming a community. Nations to regions, regions to continents, continents to globe. Indeed, a global nation. Not because we suddenly became morally enlightened, but because reality keeps forcing the lesson upon us. Climate change does not respect borders. Pandemics do not carry passports. Financial crises travel. Artificial intelligence travels. Pollution travels. Migration, obviously, travels. Instability travels. Whether we like it or not, we increasingly share a common future. So solidarity is not about helping somebody else over there somewhere. It's about recognizing that there is no longer quite such a thing as over there. We're connected. We have mutual interests. Now, let me be clear, none of this means ignoring history. Quite the opposite. The world remains profoundly unequal. The legacies of colonialism remain visible. The legacies of slavery remain visible. Climate change has been caused overwhelmingly by richer countries, while many poorer countries bear the greatest consequences. These realities matter and reparative approaches matter, but for people across the global south, this conversation is not only about past injustice, it's about future possibility. Living in Colombia and working across Africa, Latin America and Asia, something's really clear that's sometimes missing from debates, I think, in Europe and North America. People certainly want recognition of past wrongs, but they also want agency, partnership, leadership. They want to help build the future. They want a place at the table, not because they're victims, but because they are leaders. And perhaps that's one reason why so many interesting ideas about international cooperation are now not emerging in Paris or London, but from the global south. Not cooperation as charity or dependency or a favor granted by some countries to others. Cooperation as shared responsibility, shared leadership, shared problem solving, mutual interest. And yes, at these conferences on the future of international cooperation, I have heard mutual interest being understood transactionally. Absolutely. Companies benefiting from trade deals, maybe, that kind of thing. Countries pursuing commercial advantage. And yes, sometimes that is part of the conversation. I think it's inevitable that it will be. The danger then is that this is not going to be an egalitarian evolution of the kind I've described, but more a corporate rebrand. And yes, this narrow spreadsheet-driven transactionalism is a clear risk to our collective future. Some in the international community are taking progressive vocabulary and shrinking it. They're moving away from the systemic self-interest of global solidarity, which aims for long-term stability and justice, and replacing it with a simplistic, transactional self-interest, which demands immediate short-term economic or geopolitical leverage. That's the challenge we're facing. Simplistic transactionalism. And when you treat international development like a series of isolated business deals, you destroy the social architecture of cooperation. True cooperation requires years of trust and institutional patience. Transactionalism treats that trust as an inefficiency. It bypasses local governments, grassroots civil society organizations, for instance, because they're considered too slow. Instead, consultants from across the world are brought in to get quick, measurable results. The actual result? Foreign corporations get paid, donor countries get photo opportunities, but what's left behind in intended beneficiary communities? Sometimes weaker local institutions than before, because we cannot solve borderless generational crises like climate collapse, forced migration, economic inequality with short-term transactional tools. You can't sign a one-time business deal to fix a global ecosystem. So we need to reclaim the broader, deeper sense of mutual interest, of solidarity, of our shared interest in solving common problems, in preventing climate breakdown, in stopping pandemics, in managing technological change, in reducing conflict, in building economic stability all over the world. Those are not selfish objectives, they are collective objectives. And in a world like ours, they increasingly require collective action. In fact, if we look at the most successful moments of international cooperation, they were almost always built on a combination of values and interests. The United Nations emerged from a moral revulsion against war, but also from recognition that continued conflict threatened everybody. European integration emerged from a desire for peace, but also from recognition that cooperation served everybody's interests. The post-war international system was built on a combination then of values and interests. And perhaps that's one lesson we need to relearn today. Because values matter enormously, of course they do. But values alone are often fragile. And we're seeing that. When economies weaken, when politics hardens, when fear rises, people start asking difficult questions. Why should we cooperate? Why should we contribute? Why should we care? And the answer cannot simply be guilt or charity or moral obligation. The answer has to include something else, the recognition that cooperation benefits us all, that our futures are intertwined, that our well-being is shared. In other words, the recognition that solidarity and mutual interest are not opposites, they are partners, describing the same reality, a reality in which humanity rises together or falls together.